Hello, and thank you for the opportunity of presenting this paper. My name is Kevin Miller. I am a PhD candidate at the School of Art and Design in Belfast, in Ulster University, and I'm working on a project that's about the design of Ulster's evangelical meeting halls. This paper is going to present a primarily visual exploration of those meeting halls with the aim of capturing a holistic account of a tradition that's dispersed and largely disregarded, existing outside of the canon of traditional heritage buildings, but I'll argue comprising an important and complex material heritage in the region. The phrase evangelical meeting hall is being used here to describe a range of buildings that are independent, are small in scale, and that have a heritage in a particular tradition of popular religion in Ulster. In the main, these are known by names such as Gospel Hall, Mission Halls, Tabernacles, or Bethels. They may also include temporary buildings like portable halls and tents. The map here has been produced through the research, and each of the points on it represents the location of an evangelical meeting hall dating from about 1850 to the present day. The map includes about 400 extant halls and about 500 that no longer exist, but that have been traced through research. Research like this has been necessary because there's no centralized organization making these buildings. This is a phenomenon of small-scale halls created by heterogeneous groups all over the region. Up until now, no record of them has been collated. Ulster, the province covering Northern Ireland and the counties of Monaghan, Cavan and Donegal in the Republic of Ireland, has a vibrant, popular evangelical Christian tradition that has been widely influential, existing across all of the different church denominations and groups of the Protestant community. Evangelicalism's core values and appeal to the Bible as providing authority has allowed it to, in effect, sidestep many of the denominational differences and power structures of the churches, providing shared ground, especially amongst rural and working class communities. Despite a lively scholarly interest in popular evangelicalism in Ulster, there's been very little engagement with materiality or with buildings. This is likely because these have a tendency to be plain, ephemeral, and mutable. This is a tradition in which constraints have historically dominated design decisions. However, this in itself probably does not explain its neglect. Material and environmental constraints have long been central to studies of vernacular architecture. It may be that the disregard of these buildings and others like them has more to do with the tendency for architectural disciplines polarized between formal architecture and the vernacular to disdain vernaculars that incorporate industrial features as inauthentic or unoriginal, as Marcel Vellinga has noted. A tendency that is perhaps eroding and represented in Ireland by Adrian Duncan's recent reconsideration of the Irish bungalow, in which he explores the bungalows that have been described as a blight on the Irish countryside as a vernacular phenomenon. As in the example here, in which text has been inscribed into drying concrete render, the evangelical tradition tends to use pragmatically the stuff of everyday life rather than develop specialized or rarefied techniques or materials. Furthermore, buildings have been intended to draw one away from physical surroundings and towards the spiritual self, where they've been considered unimportant, just a facility used for convenience, as Francis King has put it. What's important is the capacity of the building to provide space to gather and the potential of social gathering to spread the gospel. The aim of this paper then is to explore the reconfiguration of these characteristics from negations to design vernacular, in which the everyday and the pragmatic are afforded a central place, and their relationship to signification and to religious belief is explored. The paper leans on the work of David Brett, who applied the notion of a Protestant plain style to design, arguing that Reformed Protestant characteristics such as distrust of imagery, an emphasis on content rather than form, a linking of the domestic and spiritual, and the replacement of hierarchical organization with individual responsibility have had far-reaching implications for visuality and design. The halls, however, represent a quotidian and a marginal playing style that's outside of Brett's interest and that is always close to contingent concerns. So to understand the everyday, the metaphor provided by Michel de Certeau of bricolage, in which products and materials that are available within a dominant system or reconfigured by users is utilized. This provides a perspective that resists architectural tendencies to privilege the static or the indigenous as more authentic. The problem here becomes how to bring together widely dispersed and disparate material practices made up of the tactics of many small groups embedded in different contexts and produce a holistic picture. The method utilizes a large data set of photographs taken as part of the research between 2020 and the present day, emphasizing careful examination through the medium photography and through the use of metadata codes and keywords to analyze and contextualize. The presentation here makes use of image matrices that allow visual comparison, respecting both the homogeneity and the heterogeneity of the subjects. These are informed by contextual and historical information, the argument being developed through the dialogue between text and image. In order to develop a perspective on the halls that expands the role of the everyday, I'll begin with some exploration of the ways that religious revival has interacted with materiality in Ulster. Religious revival is a spontaneous period of religious fervour, often associated with a high number of conversions, in which, in this tradition, individuals profess belief and achieve assurance of salvation. Accounts and histories of the halls frequently mention as their origins the dramatic revival that occurred in 1859, or the revival of the 1920s associated with the evangelist W.P. Nicholson, and express longing for the next. Present in many of the mission halls is the motif of the Kells schoolhouse, as you see here on the right in the painting. The book on the left depicts the Kells schoolhouse too, which is traditionally seen as a starting point for the revival. This is a building with a visual and morphological similarity to the later meeting halls, and schoolhouses appear to have been places in which networks of small prayer meetings were operating at the time of the revival. The image visually illustrates a description of the revival in which metaphorical saving rays emanate from the humble schoolhouse, reaching 100,000 converts. The centering of the account in the schoolhouse indicates a tendency for the revival to travel through ordinary spaces and ordinary people, rather than the channels of the churches and the clergy. As the revival narratives progress, they tend to take on an anti-architectural quality, in which human bodies overrun the structures of the mainstream churches. People exceed customary times and spaces and organizations. They crowd into buildings to the extent that they damage them. They fall prostrate, speak in tongues, stay up all night. They fill all kinds of buildings, eventually meeting outdoors in the open air when their numbers become too big to be accommodated. As much as it has been said to have eroded the power of the churches and the clergy, the revival and narratives of revival also exceeded the old architectures and required new ones. This hall at Drumlock in County Down appears to date to the 1850s and may be amongst the very few buildings that relate to the small hall tradition and the 1859 revival. Very clear here is the simplicity of the building. It's a single cell, an interior of about 10 by 20 feet, and it's been placed in a field corner where there is available land, built to provide a space to gather for a small group and scaled to their means and size. This image shows the interior of a hall dating to the 1930s. The main focus of the hall is to provide an interior like this, a meeting space for people to simply gather. They tend to have a rectangular floor pan with seating arranged longitudinally facing a platform at the opposite end to the entrance. It's very rare that windows are placed behind the platform as they are in a church. The central pulpit reflects the prominent role given to the spoken word and the importance of very direct communication and sincerity in a tradition that seeks to effect an internal personal conviction. This image compares a range of hall interiors photographed facing the focal point of the pulpit, demonstrating the many ways in which this interior space can be achieved. It's worth noting that such a viewpoint can be overstated, and that halls can also be rearranged in the round for communion services, and a second focal point introduced in the form of a communion table in the centre. Colours in the interiors tend to be restrained, with text as the primary method of decoration and with timber finishes used prominently. The arrangement of seating, texts and platform can be created from many possible elements at different times, An examination of the interior here reveals a combination of different parts reflecting changing needs and availability. Affordable timber benches or forms made by J.P. Corrie, a local hardware merchant, have often been replaced by office or hotel chairs, or by contemporary forms made with box steel frames and well upholstered, which are manufactured by a local company who supplies many of the gospel halls. Together, these parts can create an interior with effective power, in which the constants of social interaction, the speaking voice, and the Bible are emphasized in ever-changing circumstances. A matrix of platform texts is presented here for examination. The choice of content in platform text tends to reflect theologies that emphasize the importance of personal conviction and belief, or the imminence of judgment. The forms chosen draw on an international heritage of Victorian and early 20th century evangelicalism, with scroll and banner motifs that translate over time into an arched format. The platform text is a location where decorative finishes and materials and elaboration that's not used elsewhere are present, so that, as John Harvey has put it, pictures of scripture are created and the Bible becomes an animating principle rather than just an authority. The shifting materials and typefaces tend to reflect commercial origins. Local sign painters, carpenters, print shops, and commercially printed posters all providing suitable texts. In many of the hall's clocks, which are visible to the assembly, allowing them to directly monitor the passage of time, an activity with implications for authority as well as practicality, are present and become a component of the overall arrangement, recontextualized often by the passages that refer to the imminence of God's judgment. The form of the corrugated iron hall is distinctive. The inclusion of a small diminished porch on the front gable, providing entry, gives it a distinctive silhouette. But the porch adds significant complexity to the building and may reflect a desire to present an appropriate shape that differentiates it from the local farm buildings, or the relative value of labour compared to materials, a small saving in materials and heating worth a considerable expenditure of labour. Most of the corrugated iron buildings in Ulster, found in Ulster's mission halls, date from the early 20th century. They do not show the markings of the large manufacturers of pre-made tin tabernacles, and are most likely the work of local contractors and builders with experience with the material in agricultural contexts. General purpose buildings, fixings, and sheets would have been available from trade catalogues and builder suppliers. Corrugated iron, of course, had become widely used in construction, replacing thatched roofs. Henry Glassy has commented on how the industrial material, as it becomes the prevailing means of roofing in rural Ireland, represents the transition from community to capital, and both reflects and hastens the weakening of community. But corrugated iron was likely amongst the material conditions that made the establishment of halls possible. Its economy and its relative ease of maintenance bring the possibility of a building that would most of the time, after all, be empty within the reach of small communities. It could be considered as the adaptive reuse of a material which was being provided by the dominant economy, and that enabled more dynamic and non-hierarchical approaches to religion to flourish. Many of the corrugated iron halls were precursors to more permanent structures, and over the course of the early 20th century, a vernacular is established in the halls in which a gabled facade provides an appropriate physiognomy that indicates the building's function. Orienting the building's gable to the road provides a clear entrance facade that can be elaborated a little to signify purpose. This arrangement is shared with other community buildings in Ulster, and small details tacitly understood as part of the local built vernacular distinguish the halls from others, such as orange halls or community centres. Details such as a parapet with coping, a stepped springer stone, or a shoulder suggest a hall. An opening near the top of the gable, often an ocular window, a date stone, or a plasterwork panel indicates economically the building's function, using commonly available materials. Symmetry tends to provide an ordering principle here, which is explored using windows or using panels of text as elements. As buildings on a domestic scale with few distinguishing characteristics, their presence in the built environment balances an emphasis on the continuity with everyday life, um, on the need not to present a hall as a special place, with the need to establish a dialogue and to remain a visible presence in relation to the built environment, and in particular to other religious and communal buildings around them. These things are all achieved through use of the local built forms. More recent halls continue to build in a manner that adapts and parallels domestic and commercial building practices. The current buildings utilize the concrete block construction, decorative stone cladding, and UPVC windows found in the contemporary new build home. Physiognomic cues range from the continuation of the gabled forms used in the past to the arrangement of windows into compositions on the facade, or attention drawn to the entrance and to the building's internal height. These continue to indicate function. The texts and their arrangements free the buildings from any one style, increasing size and typographic clarity in the texts, now reflecting a concern with the scale of the car. One of the most visible aspects of the halls is the displays of text. The exterior of the hall is an opportunity to create a wayside pulpit, making a canon of biblical texts present in the everyday lives of commuters and passers-by. The existence of these texts then becomes something that must be actively ignored, and this being the case, always presents the possibility of being accepted and remembered rather than ignored. Typographic choices include blackletter with its connotations of the original Gutenberg Bible and its increased suitability for more decorative rendering and the provision of a variety. But we also see sans serifs and serifs in contrasting colours with very simple figure ground compositions that are clearly designed for visibility. Commercially available posters designed in this way by the Trinitarian Bible Society, for example, are commonly used and appear to be influential in the locally made designs. As elsewhere, a range of techniques and materials are in evidence, and groups work with signwriters as well as local print shops and commercial signage manufacturers to create designs. There's also a less strident mode in evidence. Text in windows and in doorways, usually applied as vinyl transfers, adorns halls rather than calling out to passers-by, presenting messages that affirm the community of the hall. In one window, the Bible itself is present. A text highlighted for consideration by the viewers is regularly changed. Different scales then, and different intonations of text are present in the environment. So applying the notion of numerous bricolage transformations within a dominant cultural economy that's provided by de Certeau to design suggests that attention be paid to the ways that the available is creatively transformed, but also to the scale, the heterogeneity, and the multiplicity of such transformations. The halls might be said to exceed a bricolage approach and to gain agency beyond de Certeau's notion of a creativity that works within dominant structures. But the perspective of this direction of inquiry, essentially from below, provides a framework for a much more nuanced approach to the subject. The plain style explored by Bretz posits that qualities such as the absence of ostentation, proximity to domesticity, and a focus on text rather than image are active design elements rather than absences. The two theories reveal the ways that such designs can operate within and between dominant power structures in the production of meaningful everyday materialities. Expression through everyday materials, reinforcing the realness of belief. Photography, with its capacity for comparison, can make a part of these creative processes visible and disseminable through the building up of viewpoints. The photographs reveal continually changing materials and techniques that make up a design vernacular in the halls, and that, in its many iterations, comprises a substantial contribution to life in Ulster. It's hoped that by documenting and naming these, they may be better apprehended in our daily lives. Thank you very much for listening to this presentation.